Good morning, Galaxians, and welcome to another live edition of the Galaxy CDs, Rocks, and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. My name is Ryan, and we've got a couple of things to go over today. We're going to start, we'll start in the chat like we usually do, but the first topic I want to go over is yesterday's meetup with eBay about the changes coming to the promoted listings campaign. eBay had several people present. There were quite a few sellers there. Quite a bit of good give and take. So we'll kind of go over that. I've got, I think, 7 kind of takeaways from that meeting and what's going on with that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Q4. I had a question from a viewer over the weekend about what my thoughts were on Q4. So I thought we would just open that up to discussion. So before we get stuck into that, let's say our good mornings, Liz, who coordinated yesterday's meetup. Thank you for coming by and thank you for putting that together. I'll start with hat tip to everyone involved, Liz, the folks from eBay, and of course the sellers who were there. It was, to be fair, actually a really productive give and take. And I give a lot of credit to the people from eBay for being willing to put themselves kind of on the firing line and openly make an effort to defend what they're doing, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. Joe, I'd flip that. Welcome to the show. Appreciate you coming by. Den Decor Depot, good morning to everyone except eBay since they can't stop screwing with things in Q4. No doubt. Liz says, I'm actually glad this isn't happening until Q1. Got to get these holiday sales, and that's something we'll talk about kind of in both of those topics that we're going to get into. Then Decor Depot says, just trying to get out of my funk today. Had a $300 pre-World War I German Stein completely obliterated during shipping. That stinks. It's insured, but it was a consignment piece, so I'm out the money until that clears. That's awful. It's still happening from time to time. I don't know. I don't want to get too far off in the rabbit hole here, but I've had a couple of listeners point out to me some articles about AI-generated fake photos of damage that have been submitted, or at least been shown as examples of ways that people are trying to get out of completing transactions. So that's another problem on the horizon. Like we don't have enough to deal with. Kapow Eagle, welcome. Hello. Good to see you. Yeah, sometimes it just doesn't seem to matter how well you pack something. It just, getting across country can be a problem. Lord Jake Ryan, good morning. Media Picker, good morning. Good luck in your final interview. That's awesome. Moving on up. Jean Bertucci, if I said that correctly, good morning. Welcome. So let's talk about yesterday's little meetup. Again, hat tip to everybody involved. It was surprisingly productive, I guess I would say. There were some key points, and one, just right off the bat, I will give eBay credit for just owning what this is. They essentially openly admitted that the program was under-monetized, undervalued. It was not generating, relative to other ad programs and ad types within the industry, the type of revenue that they felt that it should. So this change is an attempt to rectify that. You could make the argument, and I certainly would, that the way they've changed the attribution, I don't think is really the right way to go about it. They never really did address the question about how they decided that it was a good idea to attribute the behavior of one buyer to the actions of a different buyer. The current program is set up so if I make a click, that click is valid for 30 days on anything that I do. They make the argument that this is going to be a more simple program, but I feel like that behavior, that click, my action, should only apply to me, not then potentially tens or hundreds of people down the line. But that's the choice that they have made in order to try to capture a little more monetization on this program. You could also make the argument, I guess, that you could have just raised the floor from 2% to 5%. It's pay to play. We all know it's pay to play. Raise the floor to bring that monetization up again without having to attribute actions to people that did not do those actions. So I'm still skeptical about how the program is set up. But kudos to them for just openly admitting that they just need this program to generate more money and that it was undervalued in their eyes. So they suggested, Kai, to his credit, openly said, you should just plan that anything you promote, you're going to pay the fee on. Your expectation should be that 100% of the items that you promote will be charged that fee. Again, that's a fair assumption. The question was asked, what was the impact on sales in the countries where this has already been rolled out? So obviously we all know that, anecdotally at least, people have said that their promoted percentage of items that were attributed to a promoted click raised from generally something in the 40 to 60% range to 80 to 90% of their sales, showing attribution to this new program. What eBay could not answer was whether those sellers were actually making more sales gross than they were prior to this change. Again, the anecdotal evidence is that they're not. Sales are not increased because of this, because the attribution, again, is going to someone who may not have actually clicked on that ad. So you're essentially just paying more fees for nothing, to be fair. But to be fair, they said just assume if you run something in this program that you're going to pay the fee. They suggest that you need to manage those promotions a lot more closely. Obviously, you want to think about, should I be promoting this item? There were several sellers, myself included, who have 10,000 plus listings. That's a pretty tall order to manage individual listings and make a decision about whether or not that item should really be promoted. One seller came on and talked about if he bought a run of jackets, and he might look into them individually by size, small, medium, and large, and decide that maybe the medium does or does not need to be promoted, but the other two might be treated differently. That's all well and good, but that's a lot of extra work now for sellers, particularly those of us who have 10, 12, 15,000 or more listings. I'm not sure that that's, in the current setup, it's almost an impossible workload. And to their credit, and we'll see if this pans out, they did say there are additional tools coming to help sellers actually do those things, to see the data, to see whether the promotion is working on a particular item, how many sales. One of the things that sellers asked for repeatedly was still being able to identify if the actual sale, whether it was attributed to a promoted listing or not, whether the individual actual sale came from an organic or a promoted link. The way it's going to be set up, at least as it sits, is you won't really be able to differentiate that. It's just going to be attributed to the promotion. They're saying that they are going to at least look into being able to show us where that final purchase actually came from, whether it was promoted or whether it was organic. Whether or not you paid the fee will be irrelevant. So we'll see. They were talking about a lot of additional tools and reporting that potentially would be available. Kai said down the road. I asked the question in the chat, does down the road mean by the 13th of January when this program rolls out? And another eBay commentator said, yes, it does. So we will see. They also believe that this promotion is simpler because if you end this promotion, once the new program starts on the 13th, it just ends rather than the click being good for 30 days, which is what the situation is currently. So if I, as a buyer, come in and I click your promoted ad today, that click is good for 30 days. If I cancel all my promotions tomorrow, that click still counts until that 30 days has expired. With the new program, if I click today and you cancel your promotion tomorrow, that item will no longer be eligible to be charged the fee. That presents for some sellers some thoughts about trying to manipulate when and where they promote in order to capitalize on getting some clicks, getting some views, getting some watchers, and then pulling that item out of promotions and letting the organic search work its magic. It'll be interesting to see what different sellers do, but that's their rationale for calling this program simpler. Again, I'm not sure I completely agree with that. You don't, until or unless the reporting starts to show how many sales are actually being generated from ads versus just being attributed to ads because of a 30-day-old click from someone else. You don't have enough information really to make this simpler. And it ends up, at least in my eyes, being more complicated. They do expect, based on their own input and what they've seen in other markets, that many sellers will adjust or abandon the program altogether, and they seem perfectly fine with that. They said repeatedly, as I mentioned earlier, you need to think about whether your particular listing or your particular category should be promoted, whether you can promote it for a little less or whether you should promote it for a little less because your margins are now more broadly affected because, as they openly admitted, you are going to pay more fees for promoted listings without necessarily getting more sales from those promotions. So that was an interesting admission from them. And I give them credit for it. Not all items fit in the program. And as an individual seller, you'll have to start digging a little deeper to decide whether it makes sense for you. The last thing that I thought was really interesting, and they were a little hesitant really to dive into it because I think it's a pretty small piece of it, but they did point out that clicks on your promoted ads do help in the back-end algorithm with getting your item surfaced. It's a small piece of what they said was thousands of things that their algorithm looks at when deciding whether to surface a listing. But the fact that your promoted listing got clicked does help your listing perform even organically. So I thought that was an interesting tidbit as well. Let me know in the chat if you haven't already, and it looks like there's a bunch of comments here, what you think of that. If you're on Team Replay, please let us know in the comment section what you think. Again, interesting information, a lot of feedback there. Again, mad credit to them for openly admitting that this is to right size the program and that sellers are going to have to do some extra work and that their current level of reporting is not super accurate. Again, I have some questions about sellers raised the question about return on ad spend, ROAS, they call it, which currently shows you essentially how much you're spending, how much you're earning per your ad spend. That number right now is pretty relevant, but when you can no longer differentiate between an item that was purchased through an organic click, but just attributed to a prior promoted click, that figure, that ROAS, the return on ad spend, becomes a lot less meaningful. And the ability, hopefully, down the road to be able to break that out and make that number more accurate would definitely be more helpful. I don't know. Let me know in the chat or in the comments how many of you actually look at your ROAS. I don't know how many people do. I know some folks do. I guess in the end, the question is, who will or will not continue to use this program? Obviously, they are aware that people are going to leave the program or make adjustments to their percentages. I am probably ultimately in that category. I'm not going to abandon the program. I was looking this morning just for giggles, and I'm getting almost 2 million additional impressions a month on my items through promoted listings, which is resulting in hundreds of sales a month. And I personally am not prepared to walk away from that, even if it costs me a little bit of money. If I make some adjustments, take my percentage down to try to counteract that, and maybe I'm still able to get the same number of impressions and sales transactions and pay the same amount I'm paying now by paying a little bit less per, that's probably math that makes sense for me. Again, let me know in the chat or in the comments what you think. Let's get back in here if I can find where we are at. Let's go right here. Liz, I think it's only simplified because the halo attribute disappeared and they did away with the 30 days past ending promo. As I said yesterday in the chat, I don't have any problem with that halo attribution. Again, at least that is tied to a person. So Liz comes in and clicks on my item today and does not make a purchase. And 29 days from now, she comes back to my site, my page, my shop, my store, and she buys something completely unrelated to what she looked at and clicked on previously. Halo attribution allows eBay to collect a fee for that transaction. I personally am okay with that because my original ad connected with Liz, who then came back, in theory at least, partly because of that ad, and made a purchase. Is it a little complicated to track and monitor? Yeah, maybe it is, but at least it's tied to that individual's behavior. The new program is Liz clicks on my promoted listing ad, and 29 days later, Brandon, media picker, comes and buys that same item off of an organic listing, and I pay the fee. I have an ethical issue with that. I much prefer the current program where those attributions are tied to an individual rather to an item. eBay has made it very clear yesterday that they felt that this was simpler because it was tied to an item rather than a person. I clearly disagree with that sentiment. Liz says she's skeptical too. They're making it more simple. However, more of your sales will be attributed to ads. And again, like I said, I mad credit to them. They owned that. They absolutely admitted it 100%. So if you watch or sell similar, will count as they are both clicks. Any click on a sponsored listing, if it says sponsored in the listing, any click, whether you're just doing research, looking, whether you click and then take further actions and watch the item, do sell similar, any of that kind of stuff, that turns on the clock so that for the next 30 days, that is then attributed to that click. Obviously, during that 30 days, anybody else that comes in and does the same thing, it resets the clock on that item. They did interestingly say that when they say item, they literally mean the individual item by eBay's item number. So if you end an item and then relist that item, it gets a new item number. That new item would not be attributable to that original click. Now, of course, if you decide to then promote that item, that resets everything. But that was interesting as well. If you end the item and relist it with a new item number, that would go away. They also talked about you can't, let's say, for instance, you end your promoted listings. Let's say you get a bunch of clicks today. Tomorrow you end all of your promotions. Then on Saturday, you decide to restart them. That original click now becomes active again. That 30-day window becomes active because the two key things to remember are the ad was clicked by someone originally, which started the clock. And when someone bought that item, the item was still promoted, whether that person clicked on a promoted link or not. So ending your promotion and then restarting it does not end that 30-day window. That will still be in effect. So there was a lot of talk about, can I just move it from one promotion to another? Can I end and restart the promotion? And in any event, the only two things that matter were, one was the original click, a promoted link, and two was the purchase within 30 days and is the item still promoted. So bear that in mind as well for what that's worth. Then to Cordebo, I understand that yes, I should assume any listing may sell as a promoted item. However, I also know that a certain percentage of my sales are also without the fee. Both can be true. Yes, and that is the case obviously today, where a larger portion of your sales are not attributed to the fee. That's going to change. Then the course says, give me an option to easily toggle a listing's promoted status on and off, and a toggle to ignore being badgered to promote a listing I don't want to promote. Yes, I'm getting reminded. I literally have one listing that I'm not promoting, and almost every day I get a message from eBay that I should promote that listing. And again, that's a case where for me, by and large, most of the things I sell, I don't have the only one. There are 3, 4, 10, 20, 100 of whatever the item is, even on older vintage books. If I have the only one, like it, promoting it probably doesn't make sense, because if somebody searches for it, the only one that's going to come up is mine. However, if you're in a really competitive category with a bunch of similar items or a bunch of the exact same item, promoting makes sense. And then, of course, it's a race to the bottom of paying more and more and more to be sure you get better and better placement. They did also clarify that we talked about when I did that episode last week, that the promoted listing priority campaign is always going to get the first slot in search results. Secondarily, slots 2 through however many will be eligible to get listings shown in those slots for people who are using the promoted listing general campaign. So that's helpful as well. Liz says, January 14th, I can hear all the clicks from sellers and their promotions and starting new every single day. Yeah, but again, it doesn't, you'd have to physically end the listing and relist it. You can't just end the promotion and start the promotion again, because that doesn't have any effect on the program. The way they laid it out last night, unless I misinterpreted it, was if the item is clicked as a promoted listing, the clock starts. And if the item is purchased within 30 days and is still being promoted, whether it's a new promotion or the first promotion, it's still going to be attributed to that initial click. So ending promotions and starting again is not going to be helpful. They did suggest that if you're making the decision to just opt out of the program altogether, that probably the 13th or the 14th is the best day to do that, because that will end all attribution. So the old program where you had that 30-day cookie that allowed a buyer to be attributed through the Halo program, for instance, that goes away on the 13th. So if you're inclined to end your promotions, but you want to run them through Q4, they suggested that the best time to end them is either the 13th or the 14th. Jeff, welcome. Good to see you. Liz says, because as it stands, reports and analytics won't matter anyways. Yes, the current reporting will be essentially useless when the new program starts. As I said, they say they're going to look into making changes to the reporting, to the analytics, which will give us, in theory, a little more vision into how things are actually being clicked, which things are being bought, whether they're being bought organically and just attributed to the promotion, or whether they're actually being bought through the promoted link, which again goes back to my initial thought. It should be tied to the individual, not to the item. But what do I know? I'm just a guy in my basement. Miss Lachey, always good to see you. Welcome. Dendicor says, I've already lowered some percentages, and given our Q4 discussion in a few minutes, I will be dropping it again next week. Liz says, if a seller has 50% of their sales via promoted listings, it's estimated that the seller will end up with 80% of their sales being attributed going forward. That seems to be, anecdotally, what we're hearing from sellers in Germany and Australia and so on, what they're seeing. I've had a couple of sellers comment that almost all of their sales currently are promoted anyway. So, but yes, this is, and again, to eBay's everlasting credit, they own it. You are going to pay more in fees, period, full stop. Media Picker says, I was promoting everything. Now I lowered my percent already, re-reviewed my prices and adjusted accordingly. On ones where I have little to no competition, I'm not promoting them at all. Yep. The issue becomes, again, that once this goes into place, the reporting, as Liz just mentioned, is not super helpful, because it's not going to be accurate unless they make the updates that they claim they're going to make. And for people who have 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 listings, doing that on an item by item basis without being able to run some kind of report that gives me a summary is going to be really, really difficult. Probably to the point where it's prohibitive from doing. Liz, the reseller, says, example, if you spent $1,000 on fees, expect to spend about $1,600 next year. And again, making those adjustments individually about which items you choose to promote and whether or not you lower your percentage, and watching, to the extent that you can, the reporting, because a couple of things are still going to be true. You're still going to be able to see how many sales you're generating that are at least attributed to the promotions, and you're going to be able to see your total impressions from promoted listings. So you can still see, at least broadly, whether the program is working in total, and decide, you know what, I'm going to go from 7% to 5%. so that I'm not paying this extra $600 a year if I'm able to get the same results. If I'm still getting 1.9 million impressions every 30 or 31 days at 5% as I was when I was at 7, I'm okay with that. I'll lower it. I'll save myself a little money and still get kind of the same bang for the buck. Even though I'll be obviously paying fees on items that are not being purchased technically through a promoted link. Kapow Eagle says, I'm not changing my fees just yet. The change won't take effect until mid-January. My sales stay higher through January, but in January, I'll really recheck various category promotions. I think that's smart, and I think that's what most people will probably do. I think Liz said kind of at the top, I'm glad this is happening at the start of Q1 rather than now. And again, I give them credit for letting us know in advance, even though we scooped them. They didn't tell us right up front that this was coming, but they did at least give, a couple of months notice so people can start thinking about what they want to do and when they want to do it. Liz says, yeah, no reason to make changes now based on the announcement. I did have a surprising number of people in the comments section of that video who said they just ended their promotions. There was a lot of discussion last night. We've talked about it on this show about treating these things as business decisions, empirical, number-driven decisions, not emotional. I'm not canceling my program. I'm not changing my program today just because I'm really displeased with this. I want to see what it looks like as it actually rolls through. Making an emotional decision, especially going into Q4 to stop something that might be generating a quarter, a third, 50% of your impressions, views, and sales could be counterproductive. So, as I always say, everybody can do what they want with their own business, but it's when things like this happen, I think it's super important to be able to take a step back and say, okay, I'm not happy about this. How can I best manage my business around this situation rather than just saying, I'm done. I'm turning it off. I'm leaving eBay. I'm doing whatever. I get the desire to be angry and to be emotional, and it is okay to be angry and to be emotional. Liz said this last night. It is absolutely 100% legitimate to be ticked off about this, but to then use that emotion to make your business decision, I think could be problematic. Miss Lachey says, it's been a wild ride. Fourth quarter off to a sluggish start this past week, and weekend felt almost normal. Sales has been off for months. We're about to get into the Q4 discussion here. Liz says, I will get firm clarification from Kai on ending starting new promo, and will let us know. Jeff says, if there's less than 4 of an item listed, I tend not to promote it. Sometimes I just match the price of the lowest price. And I talk about that all the time. As I comp things, I'm looking at price, reputation of the seller. If the seller's 88 feedback, what's the quality of the item? How many photos do they have of the item? They say it's a first edition. Do they have a picture of the first edition page? Those kind of things matter when deciding where I want to price things. And to your point, whether or not you decide to promote them. Kapow Eagle says, I can see more sellers doing a modified monthly end and sell similar schedule. Then Decor, my Q4 October was flat to slightly down. November to date is normal versus any other time. Then Q4, 5 weeks from the ground deadline for Christmas, going to be severely backloaded. Currently dynamic promoting at 10.4%, under 20, 7.4, over 20. The under 20 will probably go to 9.4 next week. 75-25 promo organic split to maintain volume. So there you go. There's some examples of how someone is studying their numbers, knowing where they're at, and making decisions on what they want to do based on that. Speaking of, then let me find it here. I got too many buttons. This is a question that I received from him over the weekend. Know you're very in tune with your numbers. No, quarter 4 isn't much of a boost for me as it is for some others. However, we had a really rough September, and the end of October kind of got back to close to normal. We're basically 6 weeks away from the deadline to ship ground, and we're not experiencing the volume we normally do. Declarations of recessions are usually backward looking, and I think we're pretty deep in the throes of a recession right now. Just reaching out to see if you're noticing similar patterns with your sales and kind of what you feel your spidey senses are telling you. So here's part two of our discussion. How is everybody's Q4? All of these shenanigans notwithstanding, what's your business look like? Have you looked compared to last year's business or 2 years prior business and gotten a sense of where the numbers are rather than just putting your finger up in the wind and say, it feels like it's slower? Because I've done that. I've talked about that on this show before where I've felt like, oh man, it's been a really slow week. And then I'll pull the numbers and it's actually been really good. It just felt slow for some reason. So what are your thoughts on Q4? My response to him individually was, my expectation really is that Q4 is going to be kind of a slow burn, late bloomer. I think it's going to take a while. Some people are in pretty dire straits. You've got people losing jobs. You've got people working jobs if they work for the government, but not getting paid. You've got people getting sticker shock from the Affordable Care Act, people who are in the network trying to purchase insurance and seeing that their insurance rates are double, triple, quadruple what they were this year. You've got people struggling with getting or not getting SNAP or getting part of it. And all of that news broadly, I think, is making people, even in decent economic condition, be a little reticent to get too far out in front on their spending. You've got people losing jobs for various reasons. Again, the government laying off people. Amazon just had a big layoff. Most of the big tech companies are doing big layoffs at the present time. The AI bubble appears to maybe be leaking a little bit of air. If that thing blows up, you're going to see a stock market crash of epic proportions. There are people who the stock market is a significant portion of their financial well-being. So I sense that people are being a little hesitant going into the holiday season to make purchases. I mentioned that my business in particular is probably just niche enough to survive. I sell higher end vintage and antique books. I also sell books for $3 to $8. So I'm capturing kind of both ends of the book market there. So my business is about on par. At the time that I messaged him about this, I was flat to last year for Q4. So from October 1st through the weekend. Yesterday was terrible. Didn't really sell much of anything. So as of this show, I'm down about 2% quarter to date. For the fall from September 1st to today, I'm essentially flat. I think I was down 0.8%. So I'm there or thereabouts. And some of that is attributable to the fact that I've been listing probably a lot lower average ticket because of the big bulk buy. I think I talked about that a couple of weeks ago in the live. I've got a lot of sub $10 books that is normally kind of not in my wheelhouse that I've been working through. So I'm still selling kind of the normal 100 to 120 odd transactions a week, but my average ticket is significantly down because my average selling price has dropped because of that big buy, which has still been profitable. It was still a good buy, still a reasonably good decision. But on top of everything else, net, I'm a bit down for Q4. Let's see where we're at here. Even standard employer plans are up on insurance. I've seen a bunch of that as well, on like Facebook groups and whatnot. My wife just went through open enrollment and hers is up 10%. I don't want to get into too big a political debate, but our healthcare system is a mess. Media Picker says up 65.3% in Q4 compared to Q4 last year. That's outstanding. Currently 22.5% in gross sales compared to last year. Brandon, I'm curious, do you know What's your kind of active listing count this year versus last year? What do you attribute this success to? Is it higher priced items or more items or some combination thereof? Or are you just seeing more and more traffic to your stuff? I know your category, CDs, is seeing a big uptick. So that I'm sure is probably part of it, but I'd be curious what your specific cause for that substantial of an increase is. And congratulations, I'm jealous. Jeff Zenick says, continuing to promote the items I promote at 7%. This means eBay takes 20% out of most of my listings, which may be a less a percentage than eBay will be charging in 5 years. And that was a question that came up yesterday as well. Why didn't they just implement a flat final value fee increase? And they never really 100% addressed that. But from what they did say, parsing the tea leaves, is that they still want this kind of option for sellers to pay to play, to pay more, to get some level of preferential treatment within, and they don't want to, I guess, penalize all sellers because they under monetize this program to start with, if that makes sense. So again, I feel like there were probably better ways to have done this than what they ultimately chose. But I understand why they didn't want to just pass this on to everyone, because they were going to make a change to this program one way or the other, because they feel like relative to other similar ad programs, it just wasn't generating the revenue it should. They did also point out, interestingly, that this is, they said, the only, I'd have to research that, I don't know, the only cost per sale program that's available in the marketplace. Everybody else is either a cost per click or a cost per acquisition. This is legitimately, even when the program changes, you only pay a fee when an item actually sells. So you're not paying up front for clicks or views. You're paying when an item sells, and they feel that they're the only ones with that type of program. Liz says she is up this quarter, but last quarter I took a lot of time off. You got to do that once in a while. I need a vacation in the worst way. Miss Lachey says down about 14% for the year compared to last year. That's kind of in the ballpark of what I'm hearing from a lot of sellers, in that kind of 10-ish, 10 to 15%. Jean says my sales were up almost 40% year to date through September compared to 2024. This quarter I'm down almost 20% versus last Q4. So again, I will ask the question to you. What would you attribute that to? Is there anything different in your listings in terms of the quality of them, the number of them? Did anything change that you're doing from the first 3 quarters into this one? Was there something particular that was available in your store last Q4 that you don't have this year? I know I've talked about a couple of times where I'll have like a particular fantastic find. I'll have a $300 book or a $500 book. You only get to sell that once, and you don't find those all that often. So when you're comping against that particular type of item, inevitably you almost have like a decrease. So I'm always curious what people think they can attribute that decline to. Obviously, the broader economy is a big one, but Media Picker says probably a factor of both, as in more listings and better items. I'm currently up about 150 in active listings than what I had at the end of last year. That's good. So you found more stuff and better stuff. And again, the price has just gone up, I feel like, in that category anyway, because there's more demand than there was a year ago. Etsy's 15% is the same as promoted listing. Don't get me started on the Etsy offsite ad program. Yes, it is. That's a big number. Big number. Lord Jake Ryan says, I've not done eBay in 20 years. Media Picker helped me start last weekend. Listed 30 items so far, and I've had 3 sales. Good start. 5 sales on Mercari this month. I see a lot of sellers that are talking about doing a little bit better on Mercari. So they continue to move in the right direction. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. Um, Lots of programs. I did a quick short video, I think last weekend, on how to preset bundle pricing. That is new over there, and it's a really cool option where you can go in and say, hey, you know, if you buy 2 items, you're going to save X%. If you buy 3, you'll save Y%, and so on. Those are really nice tools that Mercari has added, and hopefully they lead to more success over there for them and for us. More for us, really. But Miss Lachey says, on a good note, Mercari sales are up for me. There you go. I think you read my mind. Denticor says, Mercari bundles have definitely boosted my sales on there. Yes, I did that just, 10 days ago. And I've had 2 bundle sales already since that were part of mine, not a customer trying to bundle stuff and then sending me an offer. So that program looks pretty good. 3 Depop sales today as well. That's awesome. Depop, like we talked about in last week's episode, continues to be a strength for both for sellers and for Etsy. Hopefully, whatever they're doing, Etsy gets their arms around it and is able to kind of implement the same kind of plans to see the same kind of growth and customer retention and buzz that Depop has, because that would be terrific, again, for them and for us. Please ask responders what their categories are. Yes, if you answered that question about your previous year's results, what category are you in? Clothing, I know Media Picker, obviously you're in media. Mine is almost completely books. Kapow Eagle, we've added 2 other platforms in last month. Etsy outperformed eBay. See, there you go. Again, we talk about it all the time. Cross listing to more platforms gives you more at bats. It puts you in front of more customers, puts you in front of different customers. Etsy in particular, to me, has a little bit, I don't want to say better, but maybe a little more economically upscale demographic. Those people are willing to spend a little bit more money to get the things that they want. They're willing to pay for more unique, more obscure, more vintage, antique type items. So the issue with like AI generated slop on their site notwithstanding, their buyer, at least in the categories I'm in, my net average ticket is much, much higher on Etsy than it is on eBay. I wish the volume was anywhere close, but that's another topic altogether. Liz, the reseller, new and used fashion, not luxury. Oops. Decor, mainly collectibles, mix of media, books, and hard goods. I've heard so many sellers say their Etsy is now outperforming eBay. Man, I wish. Again, on a per item basis, the net margins for me are way, way better, unless I pay the offsite ad fee on Etsy than they are on eBay. Partly because of the fees, but because the average ticket is so much higher. Lord Jake Ryan says, I've handmade on Etsy, 8 sales this month. That is up 700%. That's pretty good. Media on Mercari, eBay, mostly DVDs. Then Decor also says, Etsy has been good of late. I have a niche that is working well on there. And that, to come full circle back to the original discussion, feels like one of the keys to success is to, I did believe it or not, I did another buy yesterday. I still have like 4,500 books left from my 10,000 book buy back around Memorial Day, but an estate seller reached out and she has decided she sells online. She does Whatnot auctions and they sell on eBay, and they've decided to niche down a little bit to become more specialized in the things that they're having great success with. One of those things was not books. So she reached out and asked if I wanted to come do a private pick in their warehouse. So I went up and bought a couple of 100 books. Again, for that very reason, I have niched down into media, primarily books. They have decided they're going to niche down into other categories. They don't want to continue to do books, and they're liquidating them. So that is one of the keys, I think, to being successful. I know there's a ton of just general resellers out there that are doing very, very well. selling anything they can get their hands on. But I feel like if you can master a category or two or three and not be trying to learn 10, 15 different categories and do all the comps and know all the research, that's probably to your benefit. So there you go. Kapow Eagle says collectibles, books, media, and ephemera. Mary McQueen, good morning. Welcome to the show. That is the last thing in the chat. Gosh, we're already at 47 minutes. So let us know if you have any other comments on things that you saw. Was anybody else who is here tonight? Did anybody else attend last night's meeting? Den Decor says, I did buy a collection last Sunday. Didn't want to spend, but I think sheer listing volume will get through the cold winter that's coming. Yeah, I've talked about previously, notwithstanding that I've still got 4,500 books from my last buy. I've still got 4 months probably worth of stuff to list. I always will take the opportunity to make a good buy when it presents itself, even if I don't think I really need the inventory. I know a lot of sellers, they get really nervous about having a big death pile. I don't have that issue because that's just money in the bank. It's stuff I can work when it's slow. It's just inventory waiting to be processed. I don't have to worry about, we got a blizzard this week. It's the holidays. There's no estate sales. I can't source any inventory. Prices are going through the roof at Goodwill, and they don't have anything that's worth anything anyway. Being able to take advantage of those opportunities when they present themselves is super important. Yes, if you're getting something out of this discussion from either from me or from each other, please do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button. And welcome to anybody who is a first timer here. A lot of new subscribers this week. Welcome to all of you as well. I appreciate it. It was a deal I couldn't refuse. Those are the best kind. And that was this deal yesterday. Like I said, I don't need more inventory, but I had picked this warehouse previously. Part of it was off limits because it was stuff they had already listed, but I snooped. I knew what was in there. And when she reached out and said, hey, you know what, we want to liquidate this stuff, come up and see what you want and make us an offer. I did. So there you go. Thanks to everyone, Liz says, that showed up last night. And thank you for covering it this morning. Hopefully that was helpful to kind of condense what ended up being about 2 hours. I left at 10:50. I was gassed. It was hella late for this guy. So I gave in and I got out of there. But it was again, credit to Liz for putting it together. Credit to eBay for seeing that it was going to be there and reaching out to Liz and asking to participate, asking to put themselves in the line of fire. Kudos to everyone who was there and not only asked good questions and gave good feedback, in some cases who were maybe less than positive about what the change were, but were still very appreciative of the fact that eBay was willing to come out and be there and own this program and own the change and do at least the best that they could to explain why they made the change and to at least take on the suggestions. We'll see whether they actually end up bearing fruit about how the reporting and how the program could be updated and changed to make it easier, easier for sellers to manage. So we'll see how it works out. Program is not going away. To be fair, there was no indication whatsoever that any amount of negative feedback on it was going to cause any change. They seem very committed to the idea that this program needs to generate more income for them than it has been in the past, and that this is the way they're going to do it. Inventory rich here for sure. Yep. There's worse problems to have. Mary says, I've really enjoyed being niched down. It's fun focusing and learning new brands. Right. And you can still learn new things. You can still develop new skills, but it's all within the same niche. So you've got this base of knowledge that you're working from. So it's not trying to reinvent the wheel. And I've made the comment before on a show, I know there's big money in tools. I'm not a tool. I'm not a handy guy. I mean, I got a pair of pliers, a couple of wrenches, and a hammer. I'm not a tool guy. I know I'm passing up a huge opportunity there, but that learning curve for me, it would be so steep to learn to be able to make money on that I would be sacrificing opportunity in the niches that I'm already strong at. So making that move for me in my business just doesn't make sense. Everybody gets to make their own decisions on that, but I feel like that is super, super helpful. Liz says it was late. Yes. And you in your pajamas, as I recall. And it wasn't nearly as late out there as it was here. Playroom 44, good morning. Thanks for coming out. Then decor tools around here go for higher than retail at auctions. I'd love to be in that category, but oh well. I would be curious too. I know that anecdotally, there's a lot of talk about prices at thrift stores going up. I've not been to an estate sale since like April. What are people finding at estate sales? Have you noticed pricing remaining pretty consistent, or are you seeing that estate sellers have also started to raise their prices on items? I know in my category in books, during the winter last year when I was going out quite a bit, I had noticed that sellers that were normally $1 to $2 per book were now $2 to $3 or $3 to $4. So there was this kind of inching into kind of higher price brackets. Still not enough to necessarily price you out of the market, but it would certainly make kind of at that lower mid tier would make a difference on, if I see a book that I think I can sell for $10, I'll buy it for $1. I might even buy it for $2, but I'm not buying it for $4 because the math just doesn't math. So curious what people are seeing if they are out sourcing. Liz says, heck yeah, not dressing up for a Zoom. No way. Right? Yeah. Now, as long as you got a nice shirt, it's all good. Den Decor says estate sales are way high in Pennsylvania. Auctions are still decent, but I've been doing private buys for 90% of items. Haven't set foot in a thrift in months. It's probably been well over a year for me, maybe over 2, since I went to a thrift store. I think I recounted some time ago that I had used to go. There's a thrift store in Dayton, which is where I do most of my estate work anyway, that I would normally just stop in because they had a huge book selection. And the last time I was there, which granted now is about 2 years ago, so it may have changed, but they had essentially eliminated books almost altogether. What used to be like a 40-foot run, 2-sided aisle full of books was one like 4-foot section. I mean, just there was nothing left. I get it. It's not a super profitable category. They may have been sending them somewhere else to have them done, or doing like Goodwill does. A lot of theirs moves online. They don't stock a lot of books in my local Goodwill, but I know a lot get dropped off because I take books there. Kapow Eagle says estate sale prices have increased in my area. Books now $3 a book on day one on average. Yeah, it's been interesting. And again, this kind of goes to the broader economy at large. Like everywhere you look, you're seeing inflationary pressures. Prices are going up, but in a lot of the categories that we seem to sell in, our actual selling prices are not really increasing all that much. A book for me that was worth $15 a year ago is probably still worth $15 today, unless something particularly unusual has happened with it. So we as sellers are getting squeezed, obviously, from all angles. Our cost of goods sold are increasing. Our fees, obviously, are increasing. Our costs to ship are increasing. Insurance costs are up, not to mention all just the day-to-day living costs are all up, but our gross selling price is not going up. So it makes it very, very tough. I know a lot of sellers, I've seen a couple recently that have just had to get out of it. We talked about, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, the big clothing fashion reselling company that had grown to, owning a warehouse and having 60 odd employees. And The margins just kept getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed to the point where they had to get out altogether. Mary says there are a few good thrift stores for books in Huber Heights. I've not been up to Huber. I do occasionally get that far north, but I try to stay kind of north of downtown, or south rather, of downtown Dayton. Then Decor says if you're willing and able to buy in bulk, you can do so much better privately, and it's easy to network. 100%. That's like this pick yesterday. Someone I had done business with previously who knew I buy books, I pay a fair price. I would buy a bunch of them. I took 200 yesterday out of their warehouse. I cleaned essentially 2 or 3 bookshelves worth of books out of their hair that they don't have to worry about anymore. Particularly with a private seller, they just want to get rid of stuff. Estate sellers, much the same way, particularly in media categories, they don't want to deal with 500 or 1,000 leftover books at a sale. They'd much rather somebody come in and offer them whatever, 10, 25, 50 cents a piece to haul them all away than having to deal with it. When you do those sorts of things, that word gets around. The big 10,000 book buy that I've been talking about since the summer was the result of another estate company telling this estate company about me and giving them my card. I'd never met these people. And I get a random text, hey, so-and-so recommended I contact you about books. We've got an estate with a bunch of books. Would you be interested? So again, like with most things, networking, talking to people about what it is you do. I know a lot of sellers are reticent to admit that they're resellers. They don't want to tell people. Man, I tell everybody. This is what I do for a living. I buy and sell old books. If you've got a bunch of old books you want to get rid of, I'm your guy. Give me a call. And it gives you opportunities to get stuff for a lot less. Had those books been at an estate sale, at a brand new estate sale, they probably would have been $3, $4, $5 a piece. And I got them essentially for $1.50. I bought 202 books total for $300 yesterday. And there's some stuff in there. There's some $15 and $20 books, and there's some $200 and $300 books in there. And they got a good deal. They got out of some inventory. They generated $300 in cash. I got a good deal. I got 202 new, pretty reasonable value inventory items that I can sell. It's a win-win. Yes, no shame in our game. With that, my friends, we are at the 1 hour mark, which is where I like to keep these. So as always, I appreciate you coming out. Hopefully you got something out of this today. And if you did, as always, please do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button. Feel free to share this with anybody else that you think might get some value out of it. Hopefully there was some good stuff there from the recap from yesterday's meeting, from what eBay had to say. And again, notice props to everyone involved with that. Decor, back to listing. Yes, I've got, I think, a budget for another 10 or 15 today before I call it a day. Media Picker, one last comment here. Reached out to a local estate company in my area, let them know what I do, and let them know if they have any CDs left at the end of a sale. Yes, that is 100%. I do it all the time. I leave my card. Every time I go to a new estate seller that I've not dealt with before, I always leave my card. So Liz, thanks again. And again, thank you so much for yesterday's event. That was really, really awesome. Again, mad props to eBay for sending representatives and for owning exactly what they're doing. With that, my friends, I appreciate y'all coming out and sharing your thoughts. And now it's time to sell. Thanks, guys. You have been listening to the Galaxy CDs Rocks and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you again next time.